The following podcast may contain discussions supported by science that may be considered dangerous to some listeners and conspiracy theorists. Discretion is advised.
The 3 Down Greencast is brought to you by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company. Home delivery available in Regina at sassbeerdelivery.ca. Welcome to the 3 Down Greencast. You are listening to the internet's only fake cricket podcast. I am Joel Gasson with, I hope I'm saying this right, we have a new rotating co-host this week, John Fraser?
It's Juan Fraser, actually. It's more dangerous with a dangerous roll of the tongue, if you will. It just sounds sexy.
Yeah, we know how much you are into your rolled R's, especially.
Yes, it's mostly my reason for loving Sergio. I mean, many other reasons now that we've spoken to him for loving Sergio. But yeah, no, I figured...
We won't talk about that kick he missed this week, no.
Nope, absolutely not. I feel like... I felt like texting him. But I'm like, that would kind of be a dick move, right? Guy misses a kick, gets run back, and you text the guy. But see, my theory is he missed on purpose so he could get out of that shit show that is Edmonton. That's usually enough to get you caught by Chris Jones, right?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Is there really any figuring out Chris Jones's roster decisions at this point?
No, it's just looking at them and laughing. And besides, I had to come back. Plaster is way smarter than me.
I mean, he's smarter than me too, so I mean...
Fair, and I mean, I won't be ashamed to say it, Plaster is better looking than me too.
It's a low bar.
That's, but I mean, seriously, that guy's a man rocket.
I mean, they do let him on TV.
They do, yes.
As not just on, a Skype thing once a week, he's legitimately does this whatever time the CBC News is on when Sam McKegg is off.
That's fair. He I don't know. I think the role of being backup John Fraser is more prestigious than being backup Saskatchewan news anchor for the CBC.
Sure. Whatever helps you sleep at night.
Well, like I said, I had to come back. I listened to you guys while I was out in Northern Ontario, and I kept going, damn. Plaster's so much better well-spoken than me, and he knows his shit more. I got to come back and bring down the level of dumb, but bring up the level of drinks consumed during recording.
Yes, I mean, that, a smart and as, many good points that one Dan Plaster is able to make. He did forget, the most important part of the program last week, which was bringing a beverage along with him. So
Yeah.
So whether you were back this week or not, I may have had to at least suspend him for a game for that decision. It really tainted the entire podcast, quite frankly.
Oh, Joel, already with the foreshadowing. The suspended and the tainting of a good thing. Love it.
Yeah, so of course, to pull back the curtain a little bit, earlier today on Monday as we record this, or I guess starting yesterday on Sunday, I texted my co-host here, John, and asked him, do we wait until the decision comes down to pod? And then our life schedule just didn't really meet up with any of that. So we're like, okay, we'll stick to Monday night and we'll make it work one way or the other because we know in some form or another he's not playing for a bit. And then we got lucky. And the CFL...
Which never happens to us.
The CFL announced just hours ago the decision to suspend Garrett Marino, of course, for 4 games. For a variety of factors, of which, of course, we will get into, and we'll discuss sort of the whole scenario of everything that went on. But we'll also talk about some good stuff from the game as well, and maybe take a little bit of a bigger look at the state of the league right now, as we're probably a good chunk into the season where we're starting to learn a little bit more about some teams. And I think it's safe to say there's kind of a top 4 in everyone else at this point.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into all of that. But
breaking news.
That's not the only, sort of weird thing that's happened this week, of course.
No, and this also, I feel like Marino gets every bit that's thrown at him. Meanwhile, I feel like the guys who put on a fake professional Indian cricket league and made a bunch of Russians lose a bunch of money, they've been charged and arrested. We need justice for these guys.
Yeah, so I had not heard this story until you sent me the tweet from Jordan Elgott.
Got to make sure we give sources. So So I see this going along my feed throughout my day. So a group of guys, sounds like most of them were fun employed, started like wearing jerseys like professional cricket teams, streaming their games on YouTube with like piped in audio and sound effects and everything to make it look like to, somebody gullible that this was real professional cricket. They even hired a play-by-play guy to do professional sounding play-by-play. So
Are you sure you were in Northern Ontario?
Yes, no, maybe.
You know who they should have hired to do that?
Center guard guy.
Exactly.
That
would have put it right over the top, and it would have been, this is totally real. Everyone would have believed it.
As soon as he said he bowls it with a center guard. I don't know if you have guards in. I don't know much.
Probably not. No.
But this was incredible. So on top of wearing their favorite team's jerseys and going out and web streaming it, it sounds like something that maybe you do for shits and giggles. I mean, I've seen some cities that they stream. I mean, hell, they stream our Tuesday open night curling, right? So you can stream anything, and people will generally bet on anything. So they started a Discord chat, brought in a bunch of rich Russians, convinced them it was the real professional cricket, and took a bunch of money off of them. So what they would do is they'd have somebody signaling like, hey, you need to not do so well here because all the Russians have put the money on the other guys. But the best part of the tweet was everything I'm saying makes it sound like it's some grandiose production. Makes it sound like this was definitely something that could be... Oh, no, this was... The pitch looked like it may have been done on the old Astrodome turf in the middle of a desert. And I am no cricket connoisseur, but I have been hungover while breezing through Fox Sports World one enough times to realize that this was bad cricket. I mean, it's not under 19 European football bronze medal game bad, but it was some bad cricket. But
yeah,
hey,
if you find the video, it's pretty blatantly obvious that this is not anywhere near professional cricket, but hey, if you can swindle a bunch of Russians right now, I mean, more power to you.
Exactly. That makes you a good guy. And these guys were arrested. So that's the problem I have. That's the beef I have. Because apparently gambling on cricket in India is illegal. Like, that to me seems like a lost revenue stream right there. You got like 1 billion people that all love cricket. Dan O'Toole should basically be on every billboard in India promoting sportsgamblewhatever.com coming to your city soon. So I feel like, though, because they took money from evil Russians, you can't punish them that bad. They're taking money from the bad guys, right? Like,
yeah, just, kind of give them a bit of a ceremonial slap on the wrist and, say, don't do it again, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I think they make them play against real pro teams to try to, like, lessen their sentence. Like, if they can get the ball through to the thing that falls down, like, every time they do that to them, that's like another month of their sentence. I think that'd be fun. I'm all for that. But you give them the goalie pads and everything. So I just think there should be justice there. You take money from bad guys, you shouldn't spend much time in the slammer.
No, that's in this scenario. That's a very fair point. Absolutely, yeah.
Right now, see, Joel. What sport? Because I was thinking of this, and as soon as I mentioned the Tuesday night curling, I almost feel like we could get people betting on our Tuesday night curling. Mm-hmm. What sport is it that you and I could pull off to maybe try? Because it's not illegal here in Canada. That's very clear by every commercial now.
I feel like this would still be fraud, but not necessarily, gambling illegal. You would still be charged with fraud, yeah.
But could you be charged with fraud if you never said? Well, I guess if you said it was pro. But what sport could you and I make up to steal money from Russians?
I mean, we've talked about doing the beer mile, so.
Oh, the beer mile, pending my own schedule, is definitely happening at Pile of Bones, and I hope that they have sawdust to clean up my vomit. I'll keep it outside.
Please do.
I will.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you and I play, for the most part, different sports other than beer drinking, so.
Dodgeball.
Yeah, I mean,
you're good at dodgeball. I feel like we could pull this off.
I know enough people that play dodgeball too that we could certainly make this happen.
Make it look really professional. I could commentate it. Although, in the eyes of some, I'm nowhere near good enough to be a professional commentator. But we could make it look legit. Dynasty could hook us up with some jerseys, get some, fireworks. I was playing with fireworks in Northern Ontario. Basically an expert now. Yeah, there was no, as an aside, there was no fireworks show. It was outrageously windy in Northern Ontario. So Atikokan for Canada Day wasn't really having a fireworks show. So me and my dad stepped up in a gravel pit filled with mosquitoes, set off about $400 worth of fireworks. Nobody died, nobody got hurt. I think we might have broken a bylaw or two, but not real laws. So,
yeah. So you would have had to deal with the rent-a-cops had there been an issue.
Yes, which would have been scandal in the town of Atikokan because my youngest sister's the town clerk.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Political scandal. Town clerk's out-of-province family causing issues.
In the old Atikokan progress.
Sparks fly. Of course, metaphorically speaking, sparks did fly at toward the end of the Rider game.
Yes.
On Friday night. My days are also mixed up lately. I sometimes forget what day is what when.
Join the club.
Yeah, so that was Friday night, of course, when the Riders handily beat the Ottawa Red Blacks, but that's really not what many people are talking about. So we're going to get into all of that and much more. But as usual, before we get into all of that, John, what is, I guess, in the ball this week?
We're making that a thing. 2 weeks ago, and if you follow me on Twitter at FraserPXP, which I'm assuming all 7 of you do that listen, I got for Father's Day this, probably, as our good friend Dave pointed out, probably asbestos-filled golf ball ice thing cooler. So now my drinks go in that, keeps them nice and cold. And went with the classic. Went with the official beer of the podcast from our sponsors of the Pile of Bones Brewing Company, the White IPA. I drank about a zillion beers when I was out in Northern Ontario, which was also a reason that I'm maybe I can have a guest appearance, but the nights that you and Dan recorded, I was Zesty John. So every beer I had, they were very good, but I was craving a white IPA so bad. It was just, I tried a white IPA from Sleeping Giant. It was great, but it wasn't quite there. I tried a bunch of hoppy, juicy blasts from Lake of the Woods, all very good. And the first thing I did when I got home, especially now that it's super hot out, Pile of Bones white IPA, and it's just, there's nothing like it. It's that damn good. It's just outstanding. We love it. We've said so many good things about it. First thing I bought as soon as I got back to the province, and felt like drinking beer again because that took 3 or 4 days.
Fair enough. Yeah. Shout out to Jared, of course, on Twitter, who pointed out the Pile of Bones White IPA was available at the game on Friday night, and that got me disappointed myself. That I realized all along I should have been tracking the Riders' record based on which beer is available that game.
Right.
So, since we've been keeping track of records, and these are some very fancy stats with very prominent sample sizes. When White IPA is available at the Riders games, they are undefeated. No questions.
Don't question it. I don't want to hear your fancy math. Nobody called Derek Taylor to break it down with his numbers and stuff. I like that. I like that stat, Joel. I like that we're now tracking the number of games that the White IPA is at and the correlation with victories. But, that victory was pretty tainted, and I hope it wasn't. White IPA doesn't make people angry, so I don't feel like that's what led to the anger at the end of the game. Whiskey does that. I get a little chirpy on whiskey. But besides that, what is in your glass? Because, as we both know, both of us have things in our glasses, unlike backup John Dan Plaster.
Mm-hmm. For me, mixing it up a little bit this week. On the weekend, I bought out of BC the Phillips Brewing Dino Sour 8-pack.
Ooh.
It's got a mix pack with 4 different quarter-fruited sours in there. It's not generally my thing anymore, but every once in a while, I'm like, you know what? I just kind of want to drink something fruity and light because it's hot as balls out.
That's fair.
So tonight, there's the regular blackberry one, which you can find in 4-packs, which is also pretty good. They have a raspberry lime and a pink lemonade. This one, though, is probably my favorite out of the pack. It's the stone fruit sour, so it's got peach and apricot in it, and it's quite delicious. It's definitely hitting the spot.
That definitely sounds good. The pink lemonade one, it feels like that is right up my alley. If you combine beer and pink lemonade. Like that's kind of my thing. So.
Yeah, there's a few different places that have done that. Mostly more so to like BC and stuff. Not too many people locally have approached that flavor yet, but
right.
It's definitely one that has kind of made its way through the rounds a little bit.
Yeah, certainly has. Even the brewery that has not been named tried to make it, and it is so bad that nobody will even buy it from them.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of things that are bad.
Yes, that one I knew I was setting you up.
Not, of course, that the Riders won. The Riders played a very good game overall against the Ottawa Red Blacks. Perhaps their most sort of consistent and complete effort of the year. As an aside, as I mentioned in the piece in 3 Down, and we'll get into the good of the game later. It's been very positive, I would say, over the last couple of weeks against Montreal and Ottawa back-to-back at home, to see them kind of put away teams they should beat and to actually, sort of beat them quite handily at the end of the day, because, under Craig Dickinson especially, but kind of generally over this franchise's history, they've kind of had a tendency to make games far more interesting than they should against opponents that really don't deserve it.
I'm taking some credit for this. And the reason I'm taking some credit for this was I was all about hitting the panic button after they pooped their pants in Montreal.
I know you were. You wanted to come on and talk about it, and I just didn't let you, basically.
That's fair. But I kind of, from that low to what I've seen the last couple of weeks, you are exactly right. They're doing what they should, and I think it's all because I reverse Fraser cursed them. You're welcome, Rider fans.
It's certainly possible, but of course, overall, not many people talking about the game as a whole, which completely understandable.
Right.
If for some reason this podcast is your only source of CFL news, of course, Garrett Marino had the incredibly dirty and disgusting hit on Red Blacks QB Jeremiah Masoli late in the game. Sort of helmet to the shins, and then the twist and the whole thing. The hit was bad enough. The hit was gross. The hit was worthy of a suspension on its own. But to me, what made the whole situation even worse, because, people say, well, what about Simone Lawrence? What about this and that? Yeah, dirty football plays happen sometimes, and sometimes it's just, an unfortunate effect of football.
Right.
In this scenario, though, what made, kind of took the thing from, okay, this is like an 80 bad to this is 120 out of 100 bad, was sort of everything that happened afterwards. Yes. That's, of course, the Red Blacks kind of get in his face a little bit understandably. He starts flexing and celebrating. Then he gets the ejection for the 25-yard penalty, which was completely earned. And then as he's walking off the field, he's got his helmet up in triumph and, pounding his chest and all this dumb bullshit. And I know you can't really suspend a guy for how he acted after the fact, but that whole scenario is just what took a really bad, unacceptable situation just to another level that just made it like the entire focal point of the entire game.
It's rare in this province that you see a Riders win so overshadowed by anything. And the
only other thing I can think of where like a Rider win was clearly so overshadowed was the Banjo Bowl where Darian Durant got his arm blown up on the delay of game that wasn't called.
Right.
Offside, whatever it was. The play
right.
It was so loud, the whistle blew, no one heard it, and Darian Durant got his arm blown up, and like they won that game, but it did not matter after the game. It was all just
Durant talk, and you're very right in that. And you and I watch an obscene amount of football.
Mm-hmm.
I alluded to the under-19 European Championship bronze medal game. Even this is something you and I were watching and poking fun at a bit this week. I can't think of a dirtier sequence and a grosser sequence from one player in any one game anywhere.
No.
Like you said, there's dirty hits. Everybody's going, well, why wasn't Simone suspended 4 games? Like, seen a bit of that already tonight is making me roll my eyes back in my head. Simone Lawrence seems to be the bar. Yeah, he's had dirty plays. But his seems to be from playing hard and playing with an edge, not being a vile, malicious idiot. And if you believe what was reported too, it sounds like Marino was going into this game intending to kill somebody. Reports came out on Twitter that Marino had threatened members of the Ottawa Red Blacks the night before while seeing them at the keg.
Yeah, it was Nate Bahar who told I believe TSN 1200 in Ottawa and Tim Baines of the Ottawa Sun/Citizen.
Yeah.
That, he basically said something to them at the keg the night before. What was said, we don't know, and what sort of tone, we don't know, and I don't think there was necessarily anything premeditated toward the game because of that encounter, or necessarily that he's going in with a plan for that game, but I don't think so. But regardless, that's just not the behavior of a normal professional athlete before a game.
No, and as an aside, who the hell does that at the keg? Like,
the keg is clearly the rowdiest place in town.
Right. Like, you go to the keg for, like, a chill evening and a prime rib that is the size of your hand. Like, you don't go in there to start running your mouth at the keg. Like, you have to, like, see, that's the part that makes me think he's an absolute maniac.
Well, it's because they're not allowed back at Earl's, probably.
Yeah, there's that, too. But that's the part that makes me think of the biggest maniac that he is the fact that he went off on somebody at the keg. But I don't know. I think I've been around guys through my playing days, not my curling playing days. But
I was going to say, if you know curlers like this, oh boy.
That's right. There, oh boy.
Oh boy.
Back in my brief taste of low-level junior hockey in the Thunder Bay area, there's guys that go out with that mentality that they're going to make a name for themselves by seriously hurting somebody. And I think Marino, from this action and his past actions, is maybe showing he's that guy. Now,
well, it's a bit of a, we're going to say, what I'm about to say is to be clarified to the fact that, yes, every player in the CFL is very skilled. They are professional athletes. They are incredible. But 99% of the Americans, there is a reason why they are here. And I think we've kind of known, and now we definitely know for sure, because everything about Garrett Marino on the field when he plays between the whistles suggests he's an NFL talent.
Yes.
I think we're figuring out pretty clearly why he is not in the NFL.
Well, the thing that blew me away is in the release today from the CFL, talking about his behavior in 12 games. Maybe just because we've talked about the amount of dumb shit he's done, it seems like he's been around for a lot longer than 12 games. Yeah. And holy crap. Like that one, my jaw hit the floor for a moment when I realized he's only been around for 12 games and has already, and I say this without hyperbole, maybe had the dirtiest play in CFL history. Like, he injured Mazzoli's ACL, the low hit, dirty, yes.
Dirty, but it's one of those things that happens. Play. It happens sometimes, yes.
Right, it's still a football play. That retching of the knee, because I don't believe that Mazzoli, he was hurt. I don't believe he was that hurt until he gave his knee the twist. And... yeah,
if Marino, kind of goes low, gets the helmet on the shins like we saw, the low hit, just does nothing else, gets up, walks away. Okay, it's a dirty play. It's maybe the 25-yard penalty, but it ends there.
It's maybe a game.
He gets maybe a game and maybe a fine, a game, something like that. But
right.
The whole circuit, of course, then the twist and the circuits of everything else, and then of course what he has apparently said, all kind of add up to the scenario where no, the CFL cannot sit on their hands in this one. Hence, we had a Monday release rather than the typical, all the discipline kind of comes down on Wednesday normally.
Can we talk about what was said or not said here for a minute, too? Mm-hmm. The fact that there are people who are closely associated with this team going out on Twitter and saying, he couldn't have said that. His teammates are black. Is the single dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my entire life. That might be a bit of hyperbole.
A little bit, yeah. I'm sure you've heard dumber.
It's up there. It literally saying, well, he couldn't have said that. It's got to be hearsay. And now the league's suspending people over hearsay. There's that segment of Rider fans out there tonight. Shut the fuck up.
Well, and...
I'm sorry. I mean, that might be harsh, and that might be crossing a line we try not to cross on this pod. But I'm sorry.
I think I'm more there are certain people I'm not surprised are saying these things.
Right.
Along those lines. I was disappointed that on the sports cage that Craig Dickinson said essentially the same thing.
Dickinson, to me, though, has to... If they're going to keep him around, though, Dickinson, to a degree, has to stick up for his guy.
He can stick up for his guy without coming out with the lame excuse of, well, his fiance's black, he can't be racist.
Which was dumb.
Again, like, that's what I mean. Like, I'm disappointed he went with that line rather than coming up with another way to defend his player.
He's young. He was fired up. He was trying to send a message. There's so many things you can say. Yeah, there was a dirty play right before that. He was too fired up. He took too much pre-workout. He was. But that's the problem, though. Is now a lot of this segment of Rider Nation that's coming out and saying, well, he can't be a racist because of this, is empowered by what Dickinson said on the sports cage. It's like they're saying, well, the coach said it, so no, I can say it. It has to be true. There's no way. And it's just, can we all, like, the thing that impressed me for a brief second on Twitter was the universal condemnation of not just the hit, but what he did. I'm like, great. Everybody sees this guy's a snap show. We all agree that needs to be out of the game, and we all agree that it needs to be rectified. But now tonight, you don't see whispers about the 4 games. You don't see whispers about anything. You see a lot of flack coming from a certain segment basically saying, well, he couldn't have said that. Like, come on, give your head a shake. Like, there's no way the league exposes themselves without hard proof from players, from TSN, from somebody that he said something incredibly offensive towards Jeremiah Masoli.
Who, by the way, isn't black, so the whole, whether everyone's immediately jumped to he obviously, like, a lot of people jumped immediately to that he has said some kind of slur against black people, and it's like, well, no, he's from Hawaii. He's Hawaiian. Like, he's from, the Pacific Nations. Like, that's... I personally don't know what would be an offensive, term for people from that area, but obviously some exist. And Garrett Marino, I guess, knows at least one of them. And frankly, it doesn't matter whether he's actually a full-blown raging racist or not.
Right.
He said it.
Right.
And that's... And, I tend to believe if he's being suspended, they have, yes, the proof either through enough evidence and through enough witnesses, or hard audio or something, that he said it.
Right.
So I don't frankly give a shit in this scenario whether he is in fact an actual racist or not.
No.
The fact remains is that he said it, and so that should be part of the suspension, which it was.
And
now, whether it was enough or too much, it can certainly be debated. I'm fine with that. I think maybe, if the league really wants to say, and, Farhan Lalji and some other people have come out and said this, if the league is really trying to come out and say that diversity is strength, I think maybe more than one game should be appropriate for saying such a thing.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, this is a league that has suspended coaches and front office personnel and others indefinitely due to the same kind of actions. Now, again, 4 games in the CFL is very significant, right? This guy's not sitting on a ton of bank. This isn't when an NHLer misses a game who's already got a $5 million contract, unless you're Chris Pronger and you live paycheck to paycheck in the NHL. This is a significant blow. I mean, we're talking about a guy, let's even just say for argument's sake.
Well, he's on his rookie contract, so I imagine, so he's probably still on the league minimum.
Right. So
65 or whatever it is now?
$65,000 a year. He's going to miss on an 18-game season. 4 game checks. So your $65,000 is divided up into 18 game checks. So he's missing 4 of those from a guy that probably isn't sitting on a mountain of cash, right? So if this doesn't teach him a lesson, and I'm not one sitting here going, yeah, the Riders need to cut him. I'm a firm believer in second chances for anybody. I mean, the CFL is largely at times a second chance league for a lot of these guys. But if he doesn't learn from this, if we're having another Marino discussion at the end of the year, somebody's got to move on. Even NHL teams figured out and moved on from Sean Avery, right?
Yeah, like in the moment after the game, at the time I wasn't really on board with releasing him.
Right.
And I'm not going to sit here and say that I think they should 100% release him.
But not right now, no.
But if they did, I wouldn't be like, what are they doing? And I know some people have been like, well, then, Winnipeg. I personally don't think Winnipeg would sign him, but
not a chance.
They're going to come out Winnipeg, or probably more likely Edmonton is going to sign him, and be like, so?
Right.
I don't care. What does that matter if if the organization has a standard, not even because dirty plays on the field, but if the organization has a standard that they're trying to set for human beings that they employ, then it doesn't matter if he's so great and he goes to Edmonton and he goes and plays well. If he's a problem for your team, he is still a problem, and you may be better off without him.
Did the team not suspend Corey Sheets way back in the day? Remember that one camp? Was it Corey Sheets?
Think way back there now.
I know. I'm because all I could remember was covering the Corey Sheets incident and hearing the terms code of conduct so many times. I think my eyes rolled back into my skull.
Yeah.
This rider code of conduct, this and that, and is that still in place? Is that still a thing we talking about? I haven't heard about it for a while, and you'd think something like, we didn't.
There's nothing. There hasn't really been much to really justify bringing it up recently, so I don't know.
That's fair. No, that's a very good point. But I mean, yeah, we never even heard that during the Deron Carter days.
Yeah.
Right? Like when I got busted with weed, I don't know. I'm with you. I wouldn't criticize the organization for letting him go, especially from such a dime a dozen position.
One where we clearly have figured out that they're able to find defensive linemen. Right. Like they've been very good at finding defenders.
Oh, so good. Basically, unless you're Willie Jefferson, you can find another guy similar to that talent level someplace who's not a complete meat stick. So I am a believer in second chances. I think Marino deserves a shot to prove himself as a functioning member of a football team after the suspension is over. Because
I'm okay with that too. I just don't think you don't cut him because you're afraid Edmonton's going to sign him.
No, because there's no good organization that's going to sign that guy. Not a chance.
Even if Edmonton does, so what?
Right. I don't think I don't. There's no way that a guy like you really think Dave Dickinson's going to sign this guy after Craig lets him go? Not a chance.
No.
Mike O'Shea's not going to sign him. I would even argue Rick Campbell in BC isn't going to sign him. So the only place he's going to go is to the one-win Elks because Chris Jones is a complete maniac. But I digress. I support them if they do it, but I think this message from the league, the longest suspension in league history, taking a serious bite out of this guy's income for the year. If you can't learn a lesson from this, I think if he does anything else, if you're the Riders, you got to let him go. He comes back from this.
I would assume that the message from the organization probably has been sent very clear to him, because also on the sports gauge earlier on Monday, Craig Dickinson said no matter what the league does, he's not playing next game.
Right.
So he was not going to be playing in Touchdown Atlantic on Saturday regardless.
Which and let's face it, that's not sitting him out at that's an event. That's a cool thing that guys want to take part in, that guys are excited to take part in, and you're sitting him out of that. So despite Dickinson, going on to say some dumb things on the sports cage today, I'm glad that was his original take, and it just, kind of went downhill from there.
Yeah, so, I mean, whether Garrett Marino, when he comes back, what happens to him, it'll be interesting. I mean, the guy's never been the most exhilarating interview to begin with, but he is going to have to answer some questions himself at some point, too. As I remember, it was, kind of after the fact, the TSN panel was talking about how, we haven't heard from Garrett Marino yet. There hasn't been an apology or anything. I'm like, well, no, because, Rider media policy is not going to make him available now probably until after his suspension's over. So...
Which, in fairness, for a guy that might not be the best spoken, it's not a bad idea. It again, going back to the Corey Sheets conference on the field beside Griffith Stadium all those training camps ago. Corey Sheets was also not a very good interview, but he spoke really well once he'd been coached by the Rider media staff on what to say. And I think Garrett Marino is going to get a little bit he's going to get to spend some times with our good friend and friend of the program, Ariel Zer.
You would hope so, but there was, of course, some good things that came out of that game as well.
Yes.
We don't want to completely overshadow the game with sort of the circus that came to town late in the game.
No.
And
mostly because I'm scared of clowns.
Yeah. What was good, and we talked about this, Dan and I, a little bit last week, was it's good to finally see, and we saw it on display again in that game, sort of the identity of this team coming to fruition.
Yeah.
Because, last year, and, we could talk about the lack of training camp and the shorter season and the whole thing, maybe they didn't quite get to it. Maybe they didn't, the offensive line wasn't quite up to it yet. The personnel wasn't quite there yet. But now you're seeing it kind of working a little bit. Whether it's ultimately a style that's going to get them to the promised land or not is yet to be seen. But it's at least something, as I said, that they can lean on. Something that you can say, okay, this is what they do. This is who they are. And that's play heavy football. That's get the ball downfield in big chunks, at sort of times to build off that. And sort of it all kind of works together, all sort of anchored by a strong defense.
I love the fact that I have been trying to figure out what this team's identity was, and you and Dan basically did it for me while I was on holiday. So that's just outstanding. Yeah. You guys talked about it last week and how offensive linemen love run blocking. Ask any single one of them. It gets them into the game. They play. It's a little old school, right? It's funny. Everybody's looking for the next run and shoot here in the CFL, and everybody basically runs the same Mark Trestman offense.
Especially now that Bakari Jones isn't in charge of an offense.
Yeah, right. I mean, so now it's back to Anthony Calvillo, who, what do you think he's going to play? The Mark Trestman offense. So it's almost kind of cool seeing a team go back a little old school with some smash.
And I mean, it's a discussion me and some friends have had more so about the NFL in recent years than the CFL. Where, everything down there, especially the last number of years, got so pass happy that defenses kept getting smaller and smaller and spreading out more and more. And it's like, eventually someone's going to swing this back the other way.
Yes.
And I think we're kind of, as sort of, the history of the CFL is being ahead of the NFL in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying this is a good thing to be ahead of the NFL in right now.
Right.
But I think sort of you saw a lot, Andrew Harris there and, Kadeem Carey sort of started swinging that pendulum toward the run game again in the CFL. And I think what you're seeing the Riders maybe doing maybe isn't necessarily from a cowbell running back, but from a system that allows, nothing to take away from Jamal Murrow, of course, but we're seeing him, take advantage of a system that's clearly built on it, working it with it. And Frankie Hickson is also contributing pretty well, including that this absolutely bonkers run he had on Friday against Ottawa.
Oh, and both are, people had questions after letting William Powell go, but man, that duo's been great. And seeing some of the power eye near the goal line, I know.
This is where I'm just, and I've talked about this with Dan and probably with you as well, just so conflicted with Jason Maas, where I'm just for a number of plays in a row, I'm just so frustrated, annoyed, and disappointed. And then he busts out the power eye, and you're just like, I can't stay mad at you.
With a French fullback as the lead blocker, you cannot go wrong with that. And maybe this is Moss. It took him time to figure out, as you mentioned, there's been a couple weird seasons. Maybe it's taken him time to figure out what he's got. And yeah, it's a little old school. It's I don't think it's boring. I mean, some might call it a little boring, but and you and Dan made the great point, and it was TSN that actually was saying the same thing during the game against Ottawa. That kept pointing out, you got these big men moving forward, going against smaller defensive linemen, smaller linebackers, and they're just pushing them around and having their way with them, right? Because you got to think, every defense is geared up to get after the quarterback. Well, if you're just playing smash mouth football and you're throwing in a good French Canadian boy to block, you're going to win games. You're going to move the ball, and some people might perceive it as risky. What the Riders do, especially in the 3-down game. But I think in Cody Fajardo, you have a quarterback who is good enough with a good enough receiving core that they still have to stay honest. You can't it's not like when you're playing Derrick Henry and the Tennessee Titans. You can't put 11 guys in the box.
No.
You have to stay honest because that Rider offense is good enough. The passing game is not where this team is going to live or die.
No.
But they're good enough that if you move too many guys up towards the line, Fajardo can burn you. Duke Williams can burn you. Shaq Evans, when he's healthy, can burn you, right? So,
and Keon Schaefer-Baker's getting there. The guy's showing more and more of what he's capable of doing every week.
Absolutely he is. I love the way that he plays ball, right? And I was listening to, it was the Green Zone. Britain was on with Jamie, and they did an interview with Duke, and Duke's This is a guy that's making 300 grand ish this year, 275.
And like, I was a little harsh on him for some of the drops at one point. Like, I thought
Right.
he had the stretch for a little bit through the Montreal game and the start of the Ottawa game where I'm like, he's making too much money to drop these balls. But I'm going to give him credit. Like, he bounced back. He did make the ones that he had to. And I know Belton Johnson's talked about it on CJME and CKOM about the dude plays ball. Like, you see him lead blocking downfield every time.
And Britton did a great story on him where he did a great interview where he was talking about his love of blocking. And Duke's like, I love smashing the guy in front of me, and I love throwing a good block, and I love seeing my running back run by me. And it's like, okay, the guy making 275 grand has bought into blocking like that. A guy that is an NFL talent.
And when your star receiver who is making that kind of money does it, everyone else gets in line, no matter what you may think about it. If you were a receiver in college and you thought, I don't need to block, I can catch everything in the world, but you're making, the league minimum, you're making 65, and then you look to your left and that guy making 275 is blocking, you're like, well, I guess I'm blocking today.
and that's exactly it. And the thing that encourages me the most, the West Division, the imbalance between the West and the East, I don't think I can't remember off the top of my head it ever being this apparent.
Yeah.
But the Riders, even in July, are playing the kind of football that can win on the road, that can win in the cold, that can win in the rain, that can win in the snow. Like, this is a good identity for this team that's hosting a Grey Cup game in a country that, I know climate change is making things pretty wacky, that, things can get pretty wacky come playoff time. And you want to play this brand of football. And the defense list, just like, I honestly think the Labor Day and Banjo Bowl might have a combined score of 9-6 just based on how good those two Ds are.
I mean, the way Zach Claros played against BC, though.
That was so good. Oh, my God. The picture of him... My buddy Neely sent it to me. The picture of him throwing mid-air out of the backfield. Put that in the Louvre.
Yeah.
Put it in the Louvre. I want it. Like, I got some new posters down here in the studio/basement. I want that framed.
Yeah. So, I mean, you bring up the rest of the league right now, and it's just remarkable.
It's stupid.
A couple of months ago, there were people talking East crossover. Like, the Eastern team might cross over to the West, and I think the door is slammed pretty shut on that right now.
Oh, that's already done. We are 5 games in. That dream is dead.
As much as I would have liked to have seen it to finally happen, it's not. And, yes, of course, things will sort of balance out eventually as teams, especially the Eastern ones, start playing themselves a little bit more. But, yeah, I mean, it's so strange right now where you have a clear top 4 in the league. Yep. And I think, most of the power rankings are pretty correct right now when saying it's, Winnipeg, Calgary, BC, Saskatchewan. I think it's fair to say that's pretty much the order. You can maybe flip BC and Calgary if you really want to make that argument.
Yep.
But then after that, it is just a complete mess of...
It is a poo-poo platter.
And it's disappointing for disappointing for the league that includes an entire Eastern Division. Because I think the CFL is generally healthier and in a better place when the East Division is good. Not necessarily like West good, but is at least competitive and good, and not combined have 2 wins through the first 5 weeks.
Well, and if you look at some of the underlying stats, Montreal's had some rough luck and ran into a motivated Rider team and a bad kick. But like, you look at like points for and against. I generally give this a glance to see who's good, who's bad. Montreal, 103 points for. There's nobody else in the East over 100. Toronto has only scored 45 points through 3 games this season.
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, the worst team in the East is Edmonton at 89. Now, again, they've played one more game, but again, they're Edmonton. In one of those games, they had 6 points against the BC Juggernaut, right? So it's just, it's remarkable. Like, you got 5-0, 4-0, 4-1, 3-1, and all jokes aside, the Riders might have a lot of time to figure out their identity because they might have a crossover spot clinched by Labor Day if this keeps up, because it's just the disparity, and I tweeted when Hamilton signed John Ryan and said, I think they can still win the Grey Cup, and everybody's, ripping him, and I semi-sarcastically pointed out, they're only a game out of first. And with John Ryan on your team, their points for are going to go up at least one at a time by some significant margin.
Yeah, and the East is interesting right now. I really don't know what to make with it. Montreal has the most significant win by beating Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Toronto probably should have the most significant win had they gone for 2 at the end of the game against Winnipeg.
Cowards.
Yeah. And then after that, Hamilton's kind of in disarray. I think Ottawa's horribly coached.
Yeah.
I think Ottawa has kind of hung around and is able to compete in games because of most of their talent more so than their coaching. And a lot of people kind of in the press box gave a little bit of weird look at times of that during the game on Friday night, but I was like, no, I don't think Paul Lapalisse is a good head coach. I think he's a great offensive coordinator.
Yes.
I don't think he's a good head coach. And
he's proven that 2 times over now.
It's showing over the course of what's going on in Ottawa right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the fact that Montreal is the team that sort of made the coaching move is, kind of weird on paper. I think, with Danny Machocha, we all knew it was coming. I think they should have just done it in the offseason and gotten it over with. But yeah, now it's just a mess, and I honestly, it's still anyone. But on the flip side for all those teams, they keep saying it. It's still anyone's game out there.
Right now, it's interesting too. You brought up the Danny Machocha thing. I've spoken to several former players who've played under Machocha. The guy can't command a room. Montreal is going to be a worse football team now because of that. And now Anthony Calvillo, for what? Is this the 4th time they've tried him as the play caller?
At least the 2nd, yeah.
It seems like it's been tried before, and it always seems, despite him being one of the best quarterbacks ever in professional football, it always seems to fail. So you made your team worse. And I say that as a Kahari guy, and you and I are both in consensus that, maybe Jason Moss gets a job next year and they bring a Kahari, I think would be a perfect fit for this football team. So the league's just, and the worst part is all they're done by Labor Day jokes aside, the Blue Bombers literally have a 4-game lead on missing a playoff spot right now.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, pardon me. That's a 5-game lead because, Ottawa would have to get past them somehow. And we're 5 games in. Calgary, Saskatchewan, everybody. The last thing you want to see is a regular season, especially what has been a very good, and I think you and Dan talked about this, it's been a very good regular season so far, especially compared to last year. The rule tweaks seem to be working. A lot of things seem to be working, but if it's 10 games in and there's nothing to play for, that's going to be bad. That's going to be ugly. That is not what the league wants and what has largely been a resurgent season until Marino goes out and does something stupid.
Yeah, but ultimately at the end of the day, I think where this is headed this season now. We've talked all about this. This means some under 500 team from the East is going to win the Grey Cup.
1,000,000%. I am looking at you, Hamilton Tiger Cats, on the strength of a John Ryan Rouge.